Greetings, everybody, from the wastelands of the internet. I have returned once again with news. News for everyone. News of the week. I hope that you enjoy the show. I see you there, Matt Barkley Jensen. I see you there, Tara Marie. Oh, let me put that away. We have news of the week and commentary. Unfortunately, I don't have a co-host with me today, but that's okay. We will make do. I can go on alone. Solo act that I am. White House defends sending up to hundreds of thousands of cluster shells to the Ukraine. Ukrainian forces are running out of ammunition. President Biden said Friday as the administration announced it will send potentially hundreds of thousands of controversial cluster munitions, musicians. Yeah, that's probably who they should send. To fuel Ukraine's efforts to break through Russian defensive lines. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the White House spent quite some time weighing the risks to civilians of cluster shells, each of which spreads dozens of hundreds of bomblets over a wide area. Unexploded ordnance or duds can remain lethal years into the future. After consultations with allies and lawmakers, Biden's top advisors unanimously recommended going ahead with the cluster transfer. Am I missing something? Am I missing? How is it that the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition? I thought they were winning the war. Okay. How are they winning the war if they're totally reliant upon other people to supply them? What war are they winning? Don't get me wrong. I have no problem with the Ukrainians fighting for their country. Okay. And I have, personally, no problem with the use of cluster munitions. They are very effective. Or can be if they're used properly. The problem is, right now, is war is a very logistics intensive business. I wasn't really going to talk about that, Mr. Barkley. Maybe I'll mention it later. But war is a very messy business. You're not going to sugarcoat it. Now, I'm not saying everything is off the board or anything goes kind of an environment. Okay, I think there are lines, but cluster munitions is not one of them. Never has been. Contrary to the popular belief that somehow they've been outlawed internationally, people are dying after the war. People always died after wars from unexploded ordnance. There's not a war where that hasn't happened. From a material standpoint, war is a waste. I want people to think on that. So we're going to start sending even more munitions to try and help the Ukrainians. What happened to this great and grand offensive by the Ukrainians, being hailed as very successful, although it's a tough slog? And now they're in a game of attrition with the Russians. It's a game of attrition now. With a group of people who that's their entire doctrine. Well, we're gonna kill this man. We've injured or killed 200,000 Soviet soldiers or Russian soldiers. Have you? I'm not saying that you haven't had successes, and I'm not saying that there are tens of thousands dead. Hello, Ukraine isn't supposed to win. Yeah, when Ukraine sent 2/3 of their new tanks into a minefield with no air support. Well, it wasn't 2/3 of their tanks. It was 2/3 of their what do they call it? The armored fighting vehicles. The Russians are not okay. First of all, let's talk about Lou and his statement he just made, right? That the Ukrainians aren't supposed to win. Does anybody remember something called the Vietnam War? Where one of the most heinous comments ever delivered by a Secretary of Defense was issued by Robert McNamara, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, when he said, "We're not trying to win the Vietnam War. We're just we're just not trying to lose it." Okay? What kind of a stupid statement is that? Well, it's the statement of we're just fighting to fight. We're just fighting to prevent the other guy from winning, from taking over. But the problem is that the Russians, whether you like it or not, right, have achieved 90% of their objectives already. They can sit back and wait on the defensive, and that's what they're doing now. And Western weaponry isn't going to make the difference. And if you don't believe me, take a look at this story. Russia says it snagged the intact parts of a Storm Shadow missile and now can study the British-made munition that's been devastating its operations in the Ukraine from long range. Russia claimed Thursday that it secured an intact parts of a Storm Shadow missile brought down in Zaporizhzhia, all right, which could possibly provide Moscow insight into a British-made weapon devastating its forces in the Ukraine. The Storm Shadow missile shot down by Russian forces in Zaporizhzhia region was brought to Moscow for study. Describing the missile as a trophy, TASS wrote that the Russian authorities had already received Storm Shadow parts and are inspecting them. The outlet reported that the materials were obtained by Dmitry Rogozin. I cannot pronounce Russian names. Rogozin. All right. Rogozin. All right. All right. The former head of the Russian space agency, Roscosmos, all right, which now runs the Science and Technology Center attached to forces deployed in the Ukraine. Rogozin said that the Ukraine shelled the area around the downed missile and sent troops to block Russian forces from securing the Storm Shadow parts per TASS, but he claimed that these efforts were promptly suppressed. Okay? Now, I remember how much the UK bragged about their Storm Shadow. First of all, the Storm Shadow missile is a dangerous cruise missile system. All right? I'm not gonna undersell it. Okay? But it is a subsonic system. Okay, it can be shot down, just like our cruise missiles can be shot down. Okay, deployment of these things don't guarantee success, and the what's going on and the fighting that's going on in the Ukraine is not the kind of warfare that the Storm Shadow missile was created for. It's not the kind of warfare that the West generally engages in. We engage in pinpoint destruction. We engage in wiping out command and control and then going in with, when the confusion is there, against an enemy that needs command and control to be effective in its military operations. This is something that most people don't understand. And that's not saying that any military doesn't need command and control. That's true, okay? But in the West, we give individual soldiers and individuals' responsibilities to the officers on the ground a tremendous latitude in determining what's going on. Whereas overall objectives are placed in the hands of the generals in the back, okay, the guys doing the fighting with the troops are the ones who are making the tactical kinds of decisions. This is not normal for how the Ukrainians were fighting, how the Ukrainians were trained. This is not normal for how the Russians were fighting and how the Russians are trained. Okay? So it's wiping out their command and control how the on the Russians has a very serious effect if you can hit them. But you then have to follow it up. You have to understand how to follow these things up. And to run an operation the way the West does is we engage in what we call air superiority first. You take control of the air as your ground moves forward. Or you move forward ground wise so fast, okay, that you don't need air support. You see, logistically, it's very intensive. It's a different style of warfare. It always has been the way Americans have fought. I want people to understand that. That's not saying Americans can't engage in guerrilla tactics and guerrilla warfare. All right, that's not my point. I'm sorry to hear that. The Russians using jamming when they go in on raids. Yeah, but they've already determined the raids. I agree with you. I agree with you, Lou. Right, but that's already after the operation has been sent in. Okay, and the operation is going forward. All right, that's a lot different than being able to repost in a defensive maneuver. Okay, I'm not disagreeing with you. Right, I want you to understand. It's just the style of warfare that you're engaging in right now is not uh, what is the kind of warfare that's being engaged by the Ukrainians, right, against the Russians and by the Russians, right, is not the style of warfare that the West engages in, and it's not the kind of warfare that we ourselves, all right, created these weapon systems for. So giving the Russians cluster munitions, okay, it sounds good. They can be effective if they're used in an overall combined force type of environment. But to be honest, I don't see them being a game changer. None of these have been a game changer. The Storm Shadow missiles haven't been a game changer. Giving them the tanks and the armor units hasn't been a game changer. I can tell you right now, SHAPE in NATO was convinced that all we had to do was bring in modern armor, hand it to the Ukrainians, and that during this counteroffensive, which was planned for half a year, as they supposedly built up their forces, it was planned for half a year. It was going to punch a hole that This is what armor is created for. Is you punch a hole and you stream the armor through. But you've got to punch that hole first. And the Russians were ready for it were ready for it from the Ukrainian side with minefields. And what happened is exactly what Lou was saying. They sent in armor, and they sent in a lot of their. I don't know how much of the Western armor, but they sent in the Western armor and a whole bunch of our Bradley fighting vehicles that we handed to them into minefields and got them bogged down. It is what it is. Since we're already overseas, let's talk about the next one. French police ban anti-cop demonstrations. We are the police. You are protesting us. We're going to ban your protests. That'll work. French police ban anti-cop demonstrations in Paris a week after a week of riots. Paris authorities banned a planned demonstration at one of the city's central square Saturday following a week of rioting and looting to protest the police shooting of a Muslim teen delivery driver. Paris police announced the ban on the protest at the Place de la Republique, all right, in a statement on their website, citing a danger to public order in a context of tensions, according to the report. The ban was upheld by a Paris court on Friday, following a week of violent rioting, which has caused more than $1 billion worth of damage to local businesses and saw the deployment of more than 45,000 police officers. Police in the country have come under attack after shooting a 17-year-old Nahel Mezouk, all right, at a traffic stop in the Paris suburb of Nanterre, all right, on June 27th. The teen's family has pleaded with rioters to cease the destruction. Don't destroy the schools. Don't destroy the buses. The grandmother Nadia told them, I'm telling them to stop. The riots appear to be spreading to major cities throughout the country and even some smaller towns, according to the reports. In towns across the country, protesters torched vehicles, attacked police stations, local authorities said. In the press and even television stations, it was mainly Paris and its suburbs, Lyon and Marseille, that were talked about. Of course, because they're the major cities. Right? Of course they were the ones that were talked in the U.S., if you talk to foreigners about the United States exists in New York, D.C., and L.A. That's it. Most of the rest of the world, hell, most of the United States. In some cases, the people don't think that there's anything better than the three cities. That those three cities dominate the world, or at least dominate the United States. That what goes on in there takes care of everything. Now, obviously, most Americans don't believe that because most Americans don't live in those cities. A lot of Americans do, granted. They are a big population. But most Americans do not live in those three cities. And then you have the wannabes, right? The wannabe cities, like Chicago, where they keep trying to attain status. But that's not the average American life. Even if you add Chicago, New York, and LA, and DC all together, you're not dealing with the majority of the American population. You're not. You're not even dealing with the majority of the people in those states. But people don't understand that, from the way the media writes things. That's all that's important. So France is the same way. The big three cities in France are the only ones that are talked about. But the rioting going on, and it was kicked off by uh, this action. Okay. Now, I know people want to bitch about the police, but but a lot of the problem that people have with the police isn't a problem with the police; it's a problem with them. And what I mean by that, what I'm trying to get at, is people have the belief that the police are there to protect and serve. They're not. That's not their primary mission. And we have forgotten that in the West. We have truly forgotten in the West that the primary purpose of the police is not to protect and serve. It's to ensure public order. Now, as a subset of that, yes, they arrest criminals. They go out there and stop crimes, okay, if they can. But their primary mission is public order. There's also a major difference here in the United States because police tend to be local. Okay? In France, the police are all under their federal force. They're part of the overall governmental structure. In the United States, you don't have that kind of structure when it comes to the police. You do with the FBI and the federal marshals and all the other problems that we have, with a over-bloated federal government, right? But the local police are the local police. And their standards are going to be different from one city to the next, even within the same county. Even more so when you start talking about counties is you have sheriff's departments, which are not city police departments or metro police departments. Completely different agencies and are completely working for a different group of people. However, they all have the same primary function: public order. Not to protect and serve. So, are you going to have situations where there's tragedies that happen? Yeah, you are. Especially when you get it, when people have it in their heads of, well, I would have done things differently because I saw the video, and the video that I saw, I didn't, I think that the police could have handled it XYZ way. If only the police had always sit up there and did it my way, I would sit up there and be perfect. Boy, these people, they're police, and the police are just so aggressive, and the police are just this, and the police are just that, and if only the police were. Well, why aren't you there? This is a local problem, according to you, and your local problem. Why haven't you stepped up and been part of the police force then? Because you don't want their job. And I'll tell you why you don't want their job. Because it ain't easy. And it's thankless in a lot of cases. Now, and I'm not a huge fan of the police in all cases, to be honest. I've got my issues with police. Do not misunderstand me. But when it comes to people's attitudes about what happens, you've got to sit up there and give, just like you want to give the poor little criminal, the poor little thug, the benefit of the doubt. That's the way our court system is designed. Well, you got to do the same thing for the police instead of sit up there rushing to judgment, as so many of those people have in the media. Found this story. This is just a joy. Biden goes to galvanize and restrain, right, NATO on the Ukraine. Oh. He's trying to restrain NATO on the Ukraine? Let's see what this is about. U.S. President will arrive in Lithuania on Monday on a mission to stoke NATO support for the Ukraine while simultaneously pouring cold water on dreams of quickly bringing the Ukraine into the alliance. There are idiots that actually want Ukraine as part of NATO. Sorry. It's a balancing act that goes to the heart of what Biden considers his biggest foreign policy achievement, uniting the West against Russia while avoiding a wider war with a nuclear superpower. Explain to me how NATO serves the U.S. interests. Why are we in NATO? There was a time NATO was necessary. It's not necessary now. They've got the EU. Let the EU handle it. You don't need us. You see, we know what this balance is. This balance is tell the U.S. to get more involved. Have the U.S. to give more. They need to give more, more, more. How about you guys in Europe do it yourselves? Now we'll go back to what I do with Muslims. Ignore it. If you call the alliance, and I use that word euphemistically, or the handling of the Ukrainian crisis as an achievement, let's see, what have we achieved? Have we achieved anything there? I thought Biden was going to deter war with Russia. I thought he was going to deter their attack on the Ukraine. And yet it's an achievement after failing, all right, to prevent the Russians from invading further. To begin with, it's an achievement when everybody else said, oh, look, the United States has been joined to stand up to Russia, and we put sanctions on Russia, and they're collapsing. It doesn't seem like the Russians are collapsing the sanctions. Just putting it out there. An achievement? That's an achievement? Really? Let's talk about some achievements from the left. Here's an achievement. Millennial and Gen Z employees are rejecting assignments, turning down offers, and seeking purpose. Here's what they expect of their employers according to Deloitte's latest survey. Really? They're not expecting a salary? Which is what pretty much the whole purpose of the employer is I offer you a salary and you do what I ask you to? That is beyond the Gen Z employees, huh? Having tracked the priorities, concerns, and motivations of the youngest generation in the workforce in the past 12 years, the annual Deloitte Global Gen Z and Millennial Survey has revealed a constant theme. Young employees want their employer's values to be aligned with their own. They want to drive social change and meaningful work. Through purpose and meaningful work, as I assume my new role as Deloitte's Global Chief Purpose and People's Officer, this is an area I am paying more close attention to. Hey, dude, making demands of your employer, all right, is going to lead you to starvation because we have gotten fat in the West. These Gen Zs that are telling you this, or you have to align with my attitudes, you're bucking the wrong frickin' horse. There's a world of hurt coming down for you guys. A world of hurt. Good morning, Sean. Welcome. There is a world of hurt coming down on the Gen Z and the millennial workforce if you think, well, I only want to work for a person who aligns with my values. You have no values. And that's the real start of this. These young kids have no values. They have no principles. They have an identity. And that identity shades their values. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that is the truth of the left. Here's the result of that attitude. From the Hill, black workers comprise 90% of the recent unemployment spike. Gee, I wonder why. The new Bureau of Labor Statistics report published Friday found that black Americans make up nearly 90% of those who are unemployed in the U.S. since April. Black workers make up 267,000 of the 300,000 new unemployment cases this spring, the report says. The current unemployment rate of the demographic site at 6%, nearly twice the rate of white unemployment, which is at 3.1%. Unemployment has remained low as fears rose about looming recession, but the rate has not remained equal among different groups. Hispanic unemployment also rose in the same period to 4.3%. I wonder how the employment statistics align with the Deloitte survey. I really do. Because too many people, especially young people, believe this bullshit. And guess who's farther left than on the spectrum? And then you wonder why the rates are so bad. Now, this is disturbing because it goes right against what Trump did. Trump stood up there and brought blacks to the lowest unemployment they ever had. Now that we've had 2 years of Biden administration policy, that trend is obviously way, way reversed. What a surprise. Got a question for you. And I'm serious. How many of these newly laid off individuals were the ones working in the, I don't know, DIE department or DEI department? The diversity, equity, and inclusion groups. Just curious. A group that solves nothing, adds no bottom line support to the company's bottom line, which leaves the company less well off. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a detriment to every single company out there. And the fact that it's being pushed by who? Governments, not the corporate world. It's being pushed onto them by the governments who say, you've got to do this. Well, how do you prove this? Okay, well, see, we have this diversity and equity officer. Talk to freaking talk to Mickey. Talk to Mickey Mouse about how good their department, right, has done for their bottom line. And it's only going to get worse, folks. It's only going to get worse. And I'll tell you why. How many people saw this story? Hey, Oz. Hey, Susan. Welcome. How many people seen this? Truckloads of fresh farm milk are dumped into Milwaukee's sewage system. Truckloads of fresh farm milk have been flushed down the drain into Milwaukee's sewer system recently as dairy plants, filled to the brim, couldn't accept more of the highly perishable commodity. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, part of the USA Today network, learned this week. The milk was treated to comply with state and federal regulations, including the Federal Clean Water Act, before it went into the waste treatment system, according to the Milwaukee's Metropolitan Sewage District. It has been treated to a level that is safe. It comes to us, and then we treat it to what we're regulated on before we discharge the water into Lake Michigan. Anybody remember when the last time you saw freaking produce being dumped. Everybody remember this? Does anybody remember reading about this in school? There were things that were happening back in the 1930s and 40s called the Great Depression. Late 1920s, early 1930s, where this very thing was happening. Because they couldn't sell the product. If you think the economy is doing well, like everyone keeps saying, oh, they got inflation under control. Really? Inflation's under control? It's at a rate right now that's driving people into the poorhouse, and these people are saying, oh, no, but it's under control because it's only like 4 or 5%. Instead of a standard 1% or 0.5% a year, we're close to 5%. Anybody who's gone to the grocery store in the last couple of years has seen the difference. Doubling of meat prices. And you know what? The left is screaming, more, we need more of this. Because that's what they're doing. Those are the policies that they're encouraging. They want more people. They want more starving poor. And it's not just this country either. You think it's just this country? What about this story? Feature, struggling Japanese dairy producers betting farm on new markets. What new markets? This is the problem. The Japanese government and dairy associations have begun to focus on promoting increased consumption of milk and other dairy products to drive demand, right, and help dairy farmers at a time when they are hurting from heavy production costs. Oh, what a freaking surprise! You think it was just the United States we were having this problem? Now, you would think this glut of excess milk would be helpful, especially for, dare I say it, ice cream production. But we know what's happened to ice cream production. We know about good old Ben and Jerry. Had to get political. Oh, and they've been in the news, folks. They've been in the news. Everybody knows about their July 4th stance. This was a reply to the July 4th stance. A Native American chief in Vermont has called out Ben & Jerry's for having its headquarters on indigenous land. The ice cream company has been receiving backlash after they tweeted on July 4th, calling for the United States to return indigenous lands. Now Don Stevens, the chief of the Nulehigan Band of Kusuk Abenaki Nation, I'm not trying to butcher your name, right, has told the New York Post that the land the company built their headquarters on is on native land. Stevens said, if you look at the traditional way of being, we are a place-based people. Before recognized tribes in the state, we were the ones who were in this place. Stevens also said he looks forward to any kind of correspondence with the brand to see how they can better benefit indigenous peoples. This was my comment at the very before that I first heard it. I said, you first demonstrate your commitment. Pull these bastards out and sit up there and talk to them directly and demand that they answer why, all right, everyone else should be impacted before they are. For their quote-unquote policies of returning native land. They can do it on their own, folks. They don't need us. But Ben and Jerry's isn't just bitching about that. Oh no. Oh no. Just a second, folks. I'm going to have to delay things a little bit here. Hold on. Sorry for the delay, folks. Anyway, back to Ben and Jerry's. I had a somebody at the door, so real life intruded for temporarily. Right. Ben and Jerry's co-founder Ben Cohen burns the Bill of Rights outside the Justice Department. Ben and Jerry's co-founder Ben Cohen set fire to a replica of the Bill of Rights Thursday outside the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. The businessman, activist, and philanthropist led a protest outside the DOJ to criticize the treatment of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, emphasizing the importance of a free press. Little did we know that our greatest struggle would be when we are trying to bring the First Amendment to the United States, said Cohen, all right, who resigned as CEO of Ben & Jerry's in 1996. Assange is a publisher, and no one denies that he published the truth, according to Cohen, right? Anything he has ever published was the truth, and the truth revealed war crimes and government lies to U.S. Congress and to the people. Really? What? What crimes? What war crimes? No, jackass, Ben. See, you use words, all right, but you won't sit up there and actually go into it. Because if you think it's a war crime, because quote unquote in a war, you're wrong. That's not a war crime. Okay? Former President Barack Obama did not prosecute Assange due to the freedom of the press, Cohen said. Oh, really? But it was his Justice Department that initiated, all right, the indictment. Oh, no, but Barack Obama didn't prosecute him, huh? Trump, in his war on journalism, shattered precedent and indicted the publisher for publishing the truth. This is the problem with lying leftist shitfucks. Okay? These are lying leftist shitfucks. It was the Obama administration which indicted in a sealed indictment Assange. Oh, it was that. It was them. Or did you already forget? For those who don't remember, we have this from The Guardian. Because where is Assange today? Assange is dangerously close to U.S. extradition after losing his latest legal appeal. Julian Assange is dangerously close to being extradited to the United States after losing his latest legal appeal, his family and observers of his long-running legal challenge says. His lawyers say that he will appeal again to the same court amid growing fears that he could spend the rest of his life in prison for publishing thousands of classified military and diplomatic documents. No, he won't. No, he won't. In a 3-page judgment handed down on Tuesday, the UK High Court, Justice Jonathan Swift, rejected all 8 grounds of Assange's appeal against the U.S. extradition order signed by then UK Home Secretary Priti Patel, in June of last year. But Assange's wife, Stella Assange, said her husband would make a renewed application for appeal to the High Court. Really? Now I'm going to sit up there and be very blunt. Assange has been in the Belmarsh prison, since when? 2019. And he's been fighting extradition to the United States since when? Since 2019. Who was president? Then. It was Trump. Right? That's true. But it was from a sealed indictment from the Obama administration. But, apparently Mr. Cohen, the lovely, piece of shit that he is, who wants to burn the Bill of Rights, and believe me, his burning of the Bill of Rights wasn't a protest. That's what he wants to do. Because, being honest and being truthful isn't part of it. Now, Julian Assange has been in Belmarsh prison, for quite a while. And he should have been released. He could be fighting extradition in the UK and could have been doing it outside of prison. There's no reason to keep holding him in prison. There was never any reason to keep holding him in prison, especially under the kind of conditions that he's in, which is solitary confinement for all intents and purposes. And in that regard, I'm 100% in favor of letting him out. But Julian Assange is not a hero. He's only published the truth. No, he shaded the truth. And he gets people like Cohen there to sit up there and go, these are war crimes. These are war crimes. Well, okay. Supposed war crimes, huh? What was actually the war crime? So they were targeting innocent civilians and they were not there. Oh, they were innocent civilians they were targeting. They didn't believe that they were somebody else? Now, you can say it was indiscriminate warfare. I won't disagree with that. That's what war is, jackass. And before somebody comes back and goes, but they were innocent. No, they weren't innocent. Okay? I'm tired of this crap. Are there innocent people? Are there tragedies that happen during war? Yes. Okay? But you're in a war. And you're not dealing with armies of the enemy. You're dealing, with a civilian populace that is sit up there and arms their soldiers and supplies them with the exact same clothing and equipment that they have. In other words, there's no standing army where you can sit up there and use civilized means of identification on. They have no intention, and that society has no intention of engaging in civilized warfare. So what other warfare can you engage in? Does that mean you just don't engage in warfare with them? Okay, well, they're going to engage like this, so whatever they say has to go. You just have to roll over and take it because they're going to engage in uncivilized warfare, and we can't win because we got rules. Is that your attitude? Is that your attitude, Ben? Is it? Somebody needs to ask good old Ben what he's done. All right? Just like these freaking climate activists. Back to the United States. Army financial counselor accused of stealing millions from Gold Star families. Okay, a Gold Star family is someone who has lost a loved one, all right, in the military. An Army financial counselor in New Jersey was federally indicted on Friday for allegedly defrauding 24 Gold Star families. Kaz Caffrey, also known as Karaz Caffrey, 41, of Colts Neck, New Jersey, was charged with 6 counts of wire fraud and 1 count each of securities fraud, making false statements in a loan application, committing acts furthering a personal financial interest, and making false statements to a federal agency. Crafty was scheduled to make his initial court appearance on Friday in Trenton, New Jersey, before a U.S. magistrate judge, Tonian Boganovi, Govanani. I'm not trying to butcher your name, dude. I just cannot pronounce that. All right? Attorney General Merrick Garland said Crafty's alleged actions were predatory to specifically target the families of fallen American service members, stealing from Gold Star families whose loved ones had made the ultimate sacrifice in the service of our nation is a shameful crime, Garland said in a statement. This is one of the few times I've agreed with frickin' Merrick Garland. As alleged in the indictment, the defendant is, in this case, used his position as an Army financial counselor to defraud Gold Star families, steal their money, and enrich himself. The indictment said that from 2018 to January, Crafty misrepresented his authority to Gold Star families to get them to invest in his financial firm. Prosecutors said Crafty abused his position of trust to enrich himself during the family's most vulnerable time. Authorities said when a member of the armed services dies during active duty, his or her surviving beneficiary, now a Gold Star family, all right, is entitled to $100,000 death guarantee or gratuity and the soldier's life insurance up to $400,000. Crafty, a major in the Army Reserves, was responsible for providing general financial education to the surviving beneficiaries. Instead, against Pentagon rules and federal law, he guided more than 9.9 million from Gold Star families to invest in accounts managed by him privately to invest and trade, often without the family's authorization, authorities said. One Gold Star family ended up losing $3.4 million in the scheme, while Crafty earned more than $1.4 million in commission taken from the family accounts. Can't put him in deep enough, folks. Can't put him in deep enough. He's the one who triggered anti-hacking laws. Actually, no, he did not. But Julian Assange did not trigger anti-hacking laws. There were anti-hacking laws long before Julian Assange. Just FYI. Long before. And I'm going to say some things about Julian. Julian Assange is not a hero. He's not. Right? He's a foreign intelligence agent. Okay? He's there to try to harm the United States government. All right? As he sees it. That's what his goal was. He wasn't publishing what he found. All right? It wasn't an act of the plumbers. For those who know what I'm talking about. He wasn't just receiving information. He was active in trying to garner that information illegally using illegal means, and he knew it. And he was also paying people to illegally gather that information for him. He also sit up there and went out of his way, all right, to help them evade prosecution. for the illegal activities that they were engaging in. So no, Julian Assange is not some great, grand, glorious hero. You can do good things and still be a dastardly individual. Just because you did a good thing doesn't absolve you of the heinous shit that you're engaging in. And not everything that good old Julian Assange published, okay, was on the up and up. Or is done with the auspices of just showing a crime. War crime or otherwise. Now, does that mean he should have been in solitary confinement? No. Does that mean that he sits up there and deserves to be treated the way he's been treated the last 4 years? No, I'm not saying that. Because it obviously isn't true. Okay? He shouldn't be treated the way he's being treated. I will admit to that. I'll be the first person to say it. I've said it for a long time. I've demanded that he be released from Belmarsh prison. Now, as far as his extradition to the United States, at this point in time, quite frankly, if I was in charge, I would sit up there and stop the prosecution. Not because, all right, I don't think he did anything wrong, though. The reason is he served his time. In Belmarsh prison, right now, he has been in Belmarsh prison for the past 3 years, folks. For the past 3 years, this man has been in prison, in solitary confinement, without a single charge being leveled against him by the country in which he's currently residing. And that's Great Britain. It's one thing to say, hey, we got an extradition treaty on you. Okay? All right, fine. We have an extradition treaty. We're in the process of he's appealing, though. Why does he have to be in prison to appeal? I wasn't cheering for him. I'm not saying you were, Glue. Julian, there are certain people that people really frost me. Julian Assange is less of a traitor, all right, because he's not an American, all right, for one reason. But he's less of a traitor than that traitor son of a bitch, freaking Snowden. Snowden should be in jail, all right, and I would throw away the damn key if I ever got a hold of him, and I wouldn't care how long he stayed in prison. There's a huge difference between Snowden and Julian Assange. Right? On to the next story. I'm sure some of you have heard this. Now health professionals are urged to call vaginas bonus holes to avoid offending trans or non-binary. Women have condemned a charity after it suggested the vagina instead be referred to as the bonus hole to avoid upsetting non-binary or trans men. Female rights campaigners today rounded on an alternative glossary, branding it both misogynistic and utterly dehumanizing. Really? Congratulations, you finally got it! You finally got the goal of these people! To dehumanize women! This whole trans movement, the whole leftist movement has been to dehumanize people, to turn them into and have them viewed as nothing more than a blob. The left doesn't want individuality to be recognized. Do you not understand this? This is the goal of these people. It's been the goal of Marx to define people not by how they are as individuals, but to define them, all right, using some other method. Marx started by doing it from an economic means, by saying your XYZ production. It's a dehumanizing philosophy at its core. And it seeks to sit up there and divide people for power in democracies, utilizing, the idea that we can sit up there and pit one identity group against another identity group. Right? This is, and you're right, Susan, it should piss you off, because that's what this has always been about. All right. If you don't believe me, here, I'm going to do a story that most people haven't seen before. Most of you may or may not know who this individual is. Stephen A. Smith lauds Charles Barkley's response to divisive SCOTUS ruling. You have to put black first. This is from Awful Announcing. Stephen A. Smith has previously advised Charles Barkley to keep out of politics, but this week, Smith praised the Basketball Hall of Famer and NBA analyst for recently taking a strong social stance. Last week, the Supreme Court ended affirmative action and declared race can no longer be a factor in college admissions, overturning long-standing programs that have benefited Black and Latino students. In response to the controversial decision by SCOTUS, Barkley altered his will to ensure the $5 million donation he has planned for Auburn University be used to benefit Black students. Okay, now, I like how there are several assumptions, about this. Because I haven't heard Charles Barkley say, well, I'm altering my will to ensure that the donation goes towards Black students. I haven't heard him say that. I haven't heard an outfit. I'm not saying that he didn't. I'm not saying he hasn't put out a public stance on it. I'm saying I haven't seen the public stance, and I suspect I would have, considering how big a frickin' media star Charles Barkley is, if he made such a statement. Okay? But regardless, on a recent episode, the Stephen A. Smith Show, the hot podcast host and ESPN personality, praised Barkley for taking action. Charles Barkley is universally loved, Charles Smith said. I know there's some critics out there about him, and there are some people who chide him, but I'll tell him to his face, he damn sure don't need to be getting into politics. He ain't gonna be no governor of Alabama, okay? Stop it. We don't need Charles Barkley as governor, but as the basketball analyst and somebody who is not shy in striving to bring truth to the surface, he's a special brother. I love Charles Barkley. I've loved him as a player. I love him even more as a person. I don't have to agree with him all the time, all right? He's got a heart of gold. Smith has not shied away from politics potentially being in his own future. That's what they've all been like, folks. But Charles Barkley sitting up there changing his will, all right, where he's going to donate $5 million. Do you realize what Charles Barkley makes a year, folks? Charles Barkley in a single year makes between $40 to $50 million. Now I'm going to be real blunt, okay, with my feelings on this. Charles Barkley, I like Charles Barkley. He is blunt. I like blunt speaking. The problem is people like Stephen A. Smith. And Stephen A. Smith is not necessarily wrong about the part where he says, in the world we're living in, all right, when you're Black and you're successful, I'm sorry, but you have to put Black first because no one else does. Where is it going to leave us if we don't look out for each other? I have no problem with that. Except for the fact that what you just expressed was a racist attitude. is this okay to be a racist? Is there something wrong with this statement? And I'm asking this genuinely. Because if there's nothing wrong with this statement, then if somebody's doing it by saying, well, I'm white, so I'm looking out for my community, you shouldn't have any problem with it either. The problem that I have with people like Stephen A. Smith, though, is it isn't just there. You see, how you want to treat people, who you want to give your money to, what charities you want to give your money to, I don't have a problem with whatever charity you want to give it to. Give it to whatever you want. It's your money. Give it to whoever you want. You should never have been expecting it to be coming from the U.S. Treasury to start with. There was your first problem with a lot of this crap. Is somebody sitting there saying, hey, somebody else's money. No, with your own money, what you do with your own money is what you do with your own money. I don't care. There are limits, of course. If you're actively trying to use your money to harm the nation, hey, I'm going to say something about it. Because I don't think that that's appropriate. But aside from that, what do you care? Now, that being said, there's a difference between identity and principles. You see, if you want to sit up there and you have a principled stand where you want to speak the truth, then that truth has to be spoken regardless, all right, of how you feel as an individual. But the problem with people like Stephen A. Smith is he claims that that's his stance. He claims that he has principles, but he doesn't. He has an identity. And if his identity conflicts with his principles, guess which one suffers? It's not his identity. And if you don't understand that about him, if you don't believe that about him, all you have to do is look at his statement about the volleyball, at the BYU volleyball incident, where the girl stood up there and said, I heard the N-word, and they called me an N-word. At BYU, they're a racist university. And people got all the video, people got everything else. Nary an N-word was spoken. Wasn't anywhere else. It was only in her own mind. And instead of saying, you owe, like, because she does, she owes the University of BYU an apology for falsely accusing them of being racist. For falsely stated. Now, if that's all she had to do was sit there and go, I thought I heard the word, all right, I apparently, maybe I misunderstood it, I'm sorry. That's all that had to be said. But you know what? What was Stephen A. Smith's comment on that? I'll be damned if I sit up there and tell this young girl to sit up there and tell her that she should do something. That's right, because you don't have principles. You have an identity, Stephen. Importing people from failed cultures it's not. All right, cultures are cultures. All right, when you have, it's not you're not wrong. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I want to expound on this a little bit. When you have two cultures coming into contact with one another, okay, there are three outcomes possible. Only three. And they are culture A kills culture B, possibility one. Culture B killing culture A, possibility two. Or they'll amalgamate and form a new culture, culture C. That's the way cultures always have reacted. And cultures don't always move forward because humans don't always progress forward. We move forward and back all the time. We generally trend forward, but not always. Not even technologically do we do that. I want you to remember that. How many people saw this story? Cannabis is linked to mental illness. a major new study rather, right, shows that people who abuse the drug are more likely to be diagnosed with depression and bipolar disorder. Okay? What a freaking surprise! Now, I'm going to try and look at this. Oops, I gotta copy this so we can read the rest of the story, but I have to do it through archive, unfortunately, because this is hidden behind a paywall. Nope, that was the wrong one. Copy. All right, and I already knew this was archived. Psychologist Susan Pinker explores new discoveries in the science of human nature. All right, read previous column here. There was a new smell in the New York City on my first visit since the pandemic. The New York I remember from 2018 was scented with subway fumes, car exhaust, and pretzels. Now the air was a heady blend of forest fire, car exhaust, and cannabis. Recreational marijuana was legalized in the state of New York in 2021, but even if cannabis is easy and legal to buy in 23 states and all of Canada, the risks of chronic use aren't talked about much. People diagnosed with cannabis use disorder were almost twice as likely to be diagnosed later with clinical depression. Several studies have shown that chronic cannabis use is linked to a higher incidence of schizophrenia among men in their early 20s, the age when the disease is usually diagnosed. The first paper on the topic, a Swedish study published in 1997, found that heavy cannabis use was associated with a six-fold increase in schizophrenia risk. In the decades since, social scientists have unearthed a strong link between heavy cannabis use and other severe psychological illnesses, including clinical depression and bipolar disorder. Now, a new longitudinal study, all right, has examined the medical records of all citizens of Denmark over the age of 16, some 6.5 million people in all, for the patterns of diagnoses, or hospitalization and treatment for substance use between 1995 and 2021. In the paper published in the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, right? Journal of American Medical Association, I think that Journal of Association of Medical America, whatever. Psychiatry in May, Dr. Oskar Hallgard Jeffson, I'm not trying to, of Aarhus University and colleagues showed that people who had previously been diagnosed with cannabis use disorder were almost twice as likely to be diagnosed later with clinical depression, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, right, the CDC. Cannabis use disorder is characterized by craving marijuana, using it more often than intended. How do you use marijuana more often than intended? Can somebody tell me? I don't intend to use marijuana. Oh, dude, I don't intend to take a toke. Dude. The facts are, it's a drug. It's a drug that causes mental illness. All right, because all drugs, when used in excess, cause mental illness of some sort or some kind of dependence, if nothing else. The idea that it's safe, that's safer than smoking, which is another lie, than regular smoking, right? Now, I will say this, cannabis use is not as addictive as nicotine. That's true. But that doesn't mean it's as good for you. It's better for you. All right. On to the next story. I don't know how many people saw this. Police announced decision after Victor Wembanyama Wembanyama, all right, Britney Spears incident. For those who don't know, this guy is an up and coming NBA star. He was just drafted by the San Antonio Spurs, um, and he supposedly has a lot of talent for the NBA. There's a lot of high expectations for this young man. Right? He was walking through a courtyard lobby or lobby of a believe a hotel in Las Vegas when Britney Spears tried to touch him on the shoulder so she could get a picture with him. But she came up from behind and his security slapped her because the security person didn't know who she was and slapped her to try and protect his client. All right. Now, Britney Spears, being the kind of star that she is, didn't take it too kindly to this. With only a few hours to go until his highly anticipated NBA Summer League debut, Victor Wembanyama, all right, has had to deal with an unlikely distraction during his time in Las Vegas. The number one overall draft pick was at the center of an altercation between his security and singer Britney Spears. Spears alleges that Wembanyama's security slapped her in the face after she tapped the young man, all right, on the shoulder to get his attention. Wembanyama says that Spears either grabbed him or attempted to grab him, prompting his security to act. On Friday, Las Vegas police attempted to put an end to the speculation surrounding the potential punishment in the altercation. No charges will be filed in the altercation between Britney Spears and Victor Wembanyama's security, police said. Wembanyama, I'm not trying to. What's your first name? Is his name Victor? First name Victor? Yeah. Hey, Victor, I'm just going to call you Victor because I can't pronounce your last name. Right? No charges will be filed in the incident for Victor's security or for Spears. The singer released a statement Thursday demanding an apology from either Victor, his security, or the San Antonio Spurs. None of the three parties have addressed that request. Victor said is set to take the number 2 overall pick, Brandon Miller, on in the marquee matchup of this year's NBA Summer League. Now, yeah, they did their job. That's exactly right. Look, somebody comes up behind you, and you got to protect the guy, and you swing to push the person away, and it smacked her in the face. And look, I understand Brittany's point of view. I understand this security's point of view. I come down in favor of the security point of view. However, an apology for saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to do that," is something that should be issued, not publicly, however. Okay? This should never have been a public issue. Right? All he had to do was say, I spoke to her and apologized to her privately. Next question. That should be what it is. Because you should apologize for something like that because you didn't intend harm. And I'm sorry you got harmed. We didn't intend it. I'm sorry your face got slapped. That's all it should have been. This is how these media stars make mountains out of molehills. And it's not good, to be honest. It really isn't good for the public. Now, the next story, folks, I'm going to read this next story a little bit here because it's in the media news. Specifically, there is a new movie coming out about Robert Oppenheimer. Okay. Now, Robert Oppenheimer is called the father of the atomic bomb. He was the director of the Manhattan Project that developed the atomic bomb and its first detonation. Okay? So let's get to the story. The real reason Harry Truman turned on Oppenheimer after World War II. On October 25th, 1945, Robert Oppenheimer met for the first and only time with President Harry Truman. Now, later on, we're going to prove that this statement is a complete lie. All right. And by most historical accounts, Oppenheimer failed to make a first good impression all right, on the president. In their Oval Office meeting, the theoretical physicist told the president that he had blood on his hands, referring to himself for the role he played in the development of the atomic bomb. Truman then told Secretary of State Dean Atkinson, all right, he had never wanted to see that son of a bitch in his office again, right? Beginning in 1943, Oppenheimer oversaw the design and development of the world's first A bomb at Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico as part of the Manhattan Project authorized by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Truman's predecessor. Under Truman, 2 atomic bombs were dropped on Japan, ending World War II in the Pacific Theater. Ending World War II. Okay? It ended World War II. World War II continued, all right, after the fall of Nazi Germany for a few more months until it was ended by the 2 atomic bombs, period. Okay? Early on in the bomb's development, some, including Oppenheimer, thought the terrible power of the atomic weaponry could deter future international conflict. By 1945, though, when Oppenheimer and Truman met, the father of the atomic bomb, Oppenheimer, as Oppenheimer is sometimes called, feared the opposite had come to pass. Though President Truman would give J. Robert Oppenheimer a presidential citation and Medal for Merit for his work on the Manhattan Project in 1946, after their Seoul 1945 meeting, Oppenheimer was effectively cut out of Truman's inner circle for the he gave him and presented this to him, all right, in 1946, it wasn't his only meeting with him, all right, just putting it out there, all right, the only time they met, all right, and management of atomic weaponry. All right, now all that's true. That's why Victory Day in the U.S. there's a difference in the U.S. and in Europe. That's true. Now, all this is true, but it belies the fact of who Oppenheimer was. Okay, Oppenheimer was seriously afflicted with the disease called communism. Okay, people who don't know anything about Robert Oppenheimer, right? And the story that's going to come out about him in this movie, which to be honest, I intend to watch. I actually intend to go to this movie. All right, this filmmakers. I want to see how close to real life it is, because Oppenheimer was an arrogant, self-righteous, narcissistic son of a bitch. And that's not an exaggeration. Okay? And he had an inflated ego from the success of the atomic project. All right? Later on in this story, all right, it goes on where he tried to oppose, okay, the building of the fusion bomb. And he also was against the decision to drop the bombs on Japan. He was against it. In fact, even before the bombs were dropped, he had sit there and proposed, no. What we have to do is demonstrate the power of the bomb. That will demonstrate to the Japanese, all right, that they have no chance of winning. And it goes on and says here, all right, that he had opposed the development of the hydrogen bomb. Well, if he'd opposed the development of the hydrogen bomb, why did he seek so fervently to be named in the lead of it, of its production, of its viability? And he did. He wanted to sit up there and argued that he be placed in charge of it. And they said no. And then it says he was caught up in McCarthyism, all right, and his security clearance was revoked for his purported ties to communism. What purported ties? You mean his direct ties with people like Fuchs? An ardent communist who stood up there and came over to the United States from Great Britain and fled to the Soviet Union after the war? Supposed ties? They weren't supposed or purported. They were real. And yet people will try to, these stories, they try to rewrite history about who Oppenheimer was. Oppenheimer was a communist. He was a communist sympathizer. Oh, not in the stated goals per se, all right? But he was willing to sit up there and give the communist Soviet Union, all right, all sorts of technical data. He was more than willing to do it. He did not see anything wrong with it because he thought that that was going to be necessary in order to prevent the United States from dominating the world. That's who Oppenheimer was. And it's true that he felt regret. All right. It's true. I'm not going to deny that. But like I said, it didn't stop him from trying to pursue being the lead to the development of the fusion bomb. Anyway, on to the next story. Anti-LGBTQP protesters break up Pride Festival in Georgia. 2,000 anti-LGBTQ protesters broke up a gay pride festival in the Georgian capital of Tbilisi on Saturday, scuffling with police and destroying props, including rainbow flags and placards, though there were no reports of injuries. Organizers accused the authorities of actively colluding with the demonstrators to disrupt the festival, but a government minister said it was a difficult event to police as it was held in an open area near a lake. The protesters managed to find ways to enter the area of the event, but we were able to evacuate the Pride's participants and organizers, said the deputy probably straight to the gridog. All right, Minister Alexander Barak Veladez. Velendez, not N, there's no N to it, so Veladez, right, told reporters. Nobody was harmed in the incident, relative term, right, and police are now taking measures to stabilize the situation. The director of the Tbilisi Pride confirmed to Reuters that all the event participants had been bused safely, but criticized the authorities policing the Pride event, which she said had been held in private for the second, which had to be held in private for the second consecutive year to reduce the risk of such violent protests. Okay, Fat Man, the plutonium one, was the one that Oppenheimer designed, right? And that's what's hit Hiroshima. Okay, let's talk about let's talk about the Manhattan Project. Okay, there were plutonium and there was uranium. Okay, uranium U-235. Okay, so one of the problems with the uranium 235 weapon, okay, was the lack of uranium 235 available. Okay, for those who don't understand, uranium 235 is chemically the same as uranium 238, but the fissionable characteristics of 235 are far greater, all right, in an uncontrolled manner when it comes to the the production and release of fast neutrons, all right, than 238. Uranium 238 is fissionable. For those who don't know, most of the uranium inside, however, of a reactor, all right, is uranium 238 inside of a regular reactor that they use for power generation. It is enhanced with uranium 235 because the release of neutrons from 235 is far greater during the fissionable process. Okay? So for people who don't know how all this works, during the development of the atomic bomb, however, in order to separate uranium 235 from uranium 238, which is the vast majority of natural uranium available, you couldn't do it chemically. You had to use some kind of physical process. And what they used was what they call centrifuges, gas centrifuges. And what they were doing was they were combining the uranium with fluorine, and then they were spinning it as a gas, all right, in these centrifuges, and the bottom of the centrifuge would collect the higher percentage of the heavier 238 infused with fluorine than the fluorine with 235, which was closer toward the middle. This is how they separated. And you had to go through this process again and again and again. Right? Now, they were convinced that the uranium 235 bomb, which is Long Boy, would work without any problems. What they were questioning is there's a byproduct to fusion, right, and the creation of plutonium. Plutonium is actually higher on the has a higher atomic number and a higher atomic weight, all right, than uranium does. Generally. So there was people that were questioning the fissionable ability, though, of plutonium into a viable bomb. So they created the Fat Boy, the first round explosive that you see if you ever see the Trinity program. All right, it was you take these wedges of plutonium and then you slam them together to create the critical mass necessary for the atomic explosion to take place. All right. But even the production of plutonium, which takes place as a byproduct of 238 in the reactors of fission reactors, right? It still wasn't a lot. The United States only had a certain amount of quote unquote fissionable material that was bomb worthy, all right, when we dropped the two atomic bombs. There's a lot of debate whether or not the third atomic bomb that we had planned for Japan was sunk when the USS Indianapolis sank, which was the cruiser that had initially delivered the first two atomic bombs. Now the government has always stated that there was no third atomic bomb ready to go. That might be true. There will always be doubts. But this is how this stuff actually works. Right? Now back to the LGBTQ stuff. This was Soviet Georgia, right, or Georgia as Tbilisi is now, or the Georgians are now a separate country, right, aligned closely with not Ukraine, But with Russia, they are very much anti-LGBTQ. And the populace is very anti-LGBTQ. And the reason that they're very anti-LGBTQ has to do with the tactics of the LGBTQ. Whereas in the West, those tactics are ignored. In the former Soviet republics, when you go out there and storm a cathedral or a church, it's taken a little bit more seriously, and the general populace gets their hackles raised. Now, I'm not one to sit up there and spread violence, but the reality is the LGBTQ that you're talking about from the Soviet in the former Soviet states, all right, are as violent as the people who just broke up this protest. Just putting it out there. Meanwhile, in the United States, we have Bucky here. Bucky here, his name's not Bucky, but Bucky here was jailed following a Skittles assault. Now, this young man is a man, okay? He is 19, okay? He does not look like a night. He looks like he's 12, I'll be honest with you. A Minnesota man is behind bars following an unprovoked Skittles attack on a restaurant patrons and employees. Investigators say that Tristan Statina, all right, 19, walked into a Mankato eatery Friday afternoon and began throwing Skittles at employees and customers. A woman identified as victim number one in court filings told police that she was hit in the back with a Skittle, which caused a stinging pain. I wonder how fast he was flinging Skittles. Taste the rainbow. Upon arriving at the restaurant, the cops noticed Skittles all over the ground and a bag of Skittles near the garbage. The suspect, victim one, told police, had a heart-shaped tattoo under his eye and another tattoo on the side of his face. Based on the description provided by the woman, police knew the male to be Tristan Statina, seen above. Statina has twice been arrested by the police in recent months. After locating Statina at a nearby business, the teen allegedly pulled away and attempted to break free from officers. Okay? As they were trying to place him into handcuffs, Statina, who tried to trip one cop, was eventually subdued. Police are going to use overwhelming force to arrest you. Period. Okay? Just so you understand, no matter what you do, when the police come to arrest you, they are going to use overwhelming force. Always. To overwhelm you. Statina, who tried to trip one cop, was eventually subdued. Okay, let's go on. Statina was charged with misdemeanor assault for the alleged Skittles suicide. All right, he's also facing misdemeanor disorderly conduct and resisting a police counts. He was arrested in May for possession of LSD and 27.92 grams of marijuana wax. Right, while the probable cause document lists no permanent address. All right, in Makito, a previous court filing indicated that he resided in an apartment in Albert Lea, a city about 10 miles north of the Iowa border. Okay. Skittles, dude. Dude, all right, first of all, this is not someone who needs to go to prison per se. This guy needs psychiatric care. All right? I don't know what this is about. I don't know what this tattoo on the face is about. I don't know what the tattoo on the side of your head's about. You're 12, dude. You're not a tough guy. You're You're not going to go down as Babyface Nelson or Jack Dillinger or any. You're going to go down as the Skittles Band. Skittles? Really? Skittles? You need psychiatric care, dude. I'm the Skittles Band. Final two stories. You know what? I'll just do one more story. Final story of the day, all right, is our police, well, not my police, but the police. Yes, the police have a mission to catch the runaway potbelly pig. Somebody's pet pig is on the loose, and people are outsmarted by a pig with legs the size of a chihuahua. Now, I realize this animal has a bit of weight to it. But this thing, this is what pigs do, folks. They escape. They escape. Pigs escape. Having the cops chase down a porker. And it wasn't even greased either. That's the sad part. It wasn't even greased. Oh my god. Outrun by a pig. Now, for those who've never dealt with animals like that, the way to herd them is just with a board. Okay? You just get a board, like a cutting board, and then just kind of guide it to where you need it to go. It's not going to get away. All right? You're not going to. You might as well try to tackle it, but you're not going to be able to tackle it. Okay, and those pork belly pigs, they don't run super fast. You can't outrun them. They're not going to get away. Just letting you know. All right, folks, that's all I got for today. I hope that you enjoyed the show. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye, everybody.